Hello and welcome back to On the Workbench. Today we're going to be looking at replacing a broken garage door torsion spring. So here's the circumstance I'm looking at in my garage. You can see the spring on the right is fine. Spring on the left, well, it's in two pieces. It's supposed to be one and the door won't go up. So today we're going to go over how we can get the situation fixed. So to get this, the first part of this replacement is going to be choosing the correct spring. So choosing the correct spring is going to be a function of the length of the spring. It's also going to be a function of the diameter of the wire, as well as the actual weight of the garage door. You can test the weight of the garage door with a bathroom scale, but keep in mind if you've still got one of these springs attached, one of these springs may be offsetting the weight you actually see on the bathroom scale and could give you a skewed result. We're going to need some specialized tools that we'll go over next. Alright, for the tools that we're going to need to do this project, we're going to need a couple tools. The first tool that we're going to need are going to be 1/2 inch diameter winding bars. These are basically just solid steel rods. They come in pairs. You can buy them. Any place that sells torsion springs should sell those. Sometimes they're included with your springs, sometimes not. 1/2 inch in diameter, and you want some solid steel torsion rods. That's how we're going to actually apply the torsion to our torsion springs. And you're always going to want at least 2 of those, so you've got a pair. And then we're going to move on to needing a pair of torsion springs. If your garage door has 2, you're going to want to replace both of them. If one's bad, that means the other one's probably about to go. So always replace these in pairs, but some doors only have one. And you want to look for a color code, a length, and a diameter, and a wire size. If you can't find that on the spring, and you've got a broken spring, you may be able to take the spring apart and get it off, and basically watch this video about halfway through, take in your scrap part or broken spring into the hardware store, and select the correct spring. So obviously you start by buying the winding rods first if you don't already have them, and then help use that as a selection for what size of spring to get. And so in my case here, I need what's known as a white spring. These are all color-coded based on the national standards. The spring here, that my old one's made in Canada. You'll see some springs are a black, and other springs are more of a chrome or a galvanized finish. Both will work just fine. The black ones supposedly have a longer life cycle, but in my experience, I'm not sure that's necessarily true, because a lot of it depends on how much you actually open and close the door and keeping track of that. So setting the springs aside, going back to the tools, and the center that connects both of your springs together is going to be a set of 9/16 screws or bolts. And so you may want a 9/16 wrench or 2, a 9/16 shallow, and a 9/16 deep socket. In my case, I'm going to use a 3/8 drive with a small flex head. This one fits nice in the palm of my hand, and I can flex this around obstructions and still have a nice little short end on to get some leverage to help me tighten down or loosen the bolts with the free end of the flex head. You're obviously going to want safety glasses. Safety glasses are number one when you're doing this here because the springs can create a very dangerous situation. So make sure you have a good pair of safety glasses. You're also going to want a 3/8 wrench, or if you don't have a 3/8 wrench or you want something a little bit bigger, you may use a adjustable wrench to turn that down to about 3/8. But if you've got it, and I happen to have it, the best way, or the tool to replace that with, is a 3/8 8-point socket. I know 8-point sockets don't get a lot of love these days. I think they're super useful to have because you never know the odd situations you'll find yourself that will use one of these, and garage door work is exactly one of those. But they're super hard to find, so if you get a chance to order these online, find them on eBay or Amazon, I'd recommend keeping a set of these in your toolbox, especially for around the house. This is a 3/8 drive, and this is the perfect size to get around the various bolts and get around the obstructions with my small flex head wrench. So I'm going to be using this method as opposed to using a wrench, but simply using a 3/8 wrench works just fine and the same. And then our next thing is you need a pair of locking pliers with a curved jaw. So this is a pair of 10-inch locking pliers. This will be enough to be able to make sure we can hold our door in the down position so the door is not moving up and down as we work on our springs. And then finally, we're going to need either a paint pen or a permanent marker to help to provide some alignment markings. And you'll want a scrap paper or something you can write on to be able to keep track of the number of windings, especially if you've got 2 springs that you unwind from your good spring. So then with that, let's go back to the door and get back to work. And so next thing we're going to do to begin the repair, you see I've still got my opener piece here. We want to get the opener and the opening attachment here completely removed from the door. Not from here, but we want to make sure that the piece of the opener is retract it back all the way. So for me, I've got a safety cable here that I'm going to pull, and then I'll have my opener pull that back. So with the opener having run, this is nowhere near the catch point. So now I can be able to move the door completely independently of the opener. And then at this point, you may want to actually unplug the opener. So then for me, I'm just going to simply pull the cord and unplug the opener so no one can accidentally activate that, whether from inside the house or outside the house, with their opener. So I've got everything completely isolated here. Got the lights on in the garage. It'd be nice if I had a fan, because it's going to be a little sticky here since we're in early July. So now on either side of the garage door, you've got the drum right here that's got a cable coming out of it. It goes all the way down to the bottom, and you can see a couple bolts here. What we're going to want to make sure is that whenever we put this back together, that this drum and this torsion rod are at the same spot. So you can use a paint pen or a permanent marker and make a line and connect them so you can see exactly where that lines up, because there's a little keyhole on the side right here where the wire goes in. And we want to make sure that, to make sure we keep the door level at the bottom, that our coil is in the, or our spool here is in the exact same place on both sides of the rod. So easiest place is just to duplicate our existing setup, just by having a nice little black line right there. So we put it back around, all we got to do is line up the line. If you've got a colorful paint pen, that would work too. And then repeat the same process on the other side. So now with your safety glasses on, we're going to come down here to our intact spring. We've got one of our winding bars we're going to put all the way in. And then we're going to take a 3/8 8-point socket, and we'll make sure that we've got enough clearance to get all the way around to both of our bolts. There's usually two, 1 and 2. And make sure you also have everything set up where you have access to your second winding bar, because you're going to need to be able to use one hand with the wrench, set the wrench down and grab the other winding bar. So it's really important that you get your tools set up so you can get to them, because once you start this, you have to be able to get and make that transition. You do need two hands to do this. You also want to make sure where you're standing is not anywhere outside or directly behind these winding bars, because of all the tension that's built up. You're going to make sure you're behind, so in case this does throw a winding bar, that it throws it elsewhere and not at you or in your face. So make sure you're out of that way. And make sure you're on a nice sturdy platform or ladder where you can get to everything. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold this winding bar down like this. And while I've got it here, I can go back, and while I've got that firmly in hand, go to use my ratchet and loosen the first nut. Come back on top. I'm using a flux head. And be prepared, because these swings could go either way. And so now that I've got it loose, now I have to begin the unwinding process. See, these are both loose by fingers. Set the ratchet down, and now I'm going to count the number of quarter turns that I make with the winding bars. 1, 2, 3, 4, 24, 25, and that's it. So I've got about 25 windings on my spring. You want to go ahead and write this number down, because you're going to need it later. And now with the tension off of the springs, we can go to our cable drums and remove the bolt, or loosen the bolts on there. 1 and 2. Get them finger loose. Again, I'm using a 3/8 8-point socket. You could also use a 3/8 regular socket wrench to do that. And so then you can see where this kind of flops around. This is also a good time to inspect your cables, make sure they're not frayed, damaged, because you might want to replace those at the same time that you're replacing the springs, because we're going to take this wheel off here. Now we're going to repeat the same process on the other side by loosening the cable drum over there. So now back in the middle, I've got a bolt here, another bolt back here that's actually holding the springs to the center support brace. So I've got, for my case, these are 9/16 bolts. So I've got a 9/16 socket, a 9/16 wrench. If you're going to put a socket on the backside here, you'll need a deep one. Again, my case may be different than your case for what you need to do to be able to loosen up these bolts. That comes right off like that. So this is basically holding our springs together onto the center bracket. And we'll go ahead and take this one all the way apart. And we'll re-screw that together and put that in our pocket for later. And we'll find our other 9/16 bolt on the other side and use our wrench. Depending on the shape of your center bracket, you may need to actually leave the top bolt in to avoid the whole center assembly from slipping down like that, because you don't want your torsion rod to be just free flow with all this weight in the middle from the two springs. So you may need to put a bolt in my case, just leave one bolt in the top and just unbolt these one at a time, and then as you bring in your new ones, you can create the support you need in the middle, so that right now it doesn't matter because I've got at least the support from this spring here if that slides down and that bolt. And then because the other side here is loose, I can slide this rod back and forth to get it out. Preferably we want it there. The other little tidbit after you get it out, you may see your center bearing supports here slide out of the end of your spring. And that's normal. Here you can see my broken spring, and that one slid out there really easily. And so make sure you don't damage that, because you may need to reuse that depending upon the spring set that you buy. And so now with the center taken apart and the wheels on the end undone, we can start to slide our torsion rod out and work our springs towards the end. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this torsion spring here, slide it down to the end, both parts of it, so that I can push the spring out of the cable drum, and then slide that off, and then be prepared to slide on the new spring. And then I'll bring it back to the middle, and you'll see how it goes. Okay, you can see we've got the cable drum here. I've got my spring here on the side. So what I'm going to do is I want to be able to slide the torsion rod out of the end. Now this may be heavy for some of you. And then as we drop it down, we can slide our cable drum out. If we've got our bolts all loosened up, you might have to do an extra little quick hand turn like I did there. Push that out of the way. Set the cable drum down. See the cable slid out there. And now I've got a free path to remove one spring. If you've got an assistant to hand parts to, that could be useful at this point. Working by yourself, you should still be able to do this without too much problem. So I've got my first coil spring, or my torsion spring off, and it's a matter of just getting the next one, the first one out of the box, and putting it on. So the one I slid off here is on the left side of the door as I look out. So that means I need the right wound spring. The right wound spring goes on the left side of the door. It's kind of a little bit opposite, and we'll get that out of the box and get that ready to go. And now with our other spring out of the box and verified that this is indeed the right wound spring for the left side of the garage door, I've just got to be able to feed this now center first onto my torsion rod. Just like that. I may have to adjust these nuts to let the rod come out of the other end. And then voila, that comes through. And we're going to reattach our cable drum. And then we'll just walk this over to the center. Then now in the center, we're going to have to adjust this nut configuration. And so then here, I'm going to take this sleeve and slide that in. And now I'm going to have to be able to work here with a couple of hands and a thumb. Reminding that I've got to be able to remove the spring on the other side. So we'll slide that off. But we still want this torsion rod supported. So I'm going to take my combination just like that, so the rod is still supported. And now that frees the spring on the right side, which is the left wound spring. And then now I'm going to slide that down to the end. And now with the spring at the end, I got the cable drum. We're going to have to slide our torsion rod back the other direction. And the first thing that's going to drop out is going to be the cable drum. We'll set that aside. The cable can disconnect. Have the drum. Then now we're going to slide our spring off. And then now with our spring in hand, we're going to go get our other spring. And now with our new spring in hand, we'll just slide this onto the torsion rod. You may have to back out some of the bolts to make it all line up. And then once that's through, we're going to put our cable drum back on and then put this back into the end bearing. So with the cable drum on, and if you've already inspected your cable to make sure everything's fine, we can reinsert our cable into the little keyhole slot. And then slide that down into place, trying to match up our markings from earlier. The markings from earlier will tell us where radially and how far in to go. Then I can just make those kind of hand tight. And I'll come back in a moment with my ratchet to tighten those up, because with those set up, we can go and slide back the other end. So now with our cable drum here firmly attached, we can slide center bearing down, or the right spring down towards the center. So now in the center, we've got our springs, and slide our parts together. We can adjust our bolts, and using that top hanging nut, loosen that up. And we will want to set that somewhere within arm's reach so we can put together our center assembly here. And connect our top nut loosely, reach into our pocket and grab the other nut. And now in this assembly here, there's that one black spacer that goes in between. Your assembly possibly could be slightly different. And then we'll have it all slid in. And then now we'll reconnect our bottom bolt here. And then with our two bolts in, put on the nuts, and then we'll come back and tighten these up. I think I said 5/16, actually I meant 9/16. So I'm going to have I'm going to use a deep socket here, and just going to make a wrench here. All right, that's the bottom. There we go. Depending upon clearance with your garage door opening bar, the tool set that you use may be slightly different. Just depends. Get them nice and snug. And now with the center snugged up, the drum all set on the right side, it's time to get the drum set on the left side. So now back on the other side, what we've got to do is be able to move our cable drum down and make the connection for our cable and our rod. In this case here, I know we're going to be pushing this down further. And then we can go ahead and get our cable put into the cable drum and make sure it's winding around the grooves correctly so that it'll lift right and we're not pinching the cable. Again, a good time for an inspection of this cable if you haven't done so. Now we're going to look at the marks that we have that we placed on the rod earlier, and then we're going to try to line up these marks so that our door goes up level. There's a chance that if you get these marks, if you get it pretty close, that your garage door, that there might be some indentations from before, and it'll go right in. So this is where it's nice having a nice short flex head ratchet. I can get right between my cable drum and the upper wall here. And now I've got my left cable drum in and aligned with my marks. That Sharpie mark right there makes all the difference for getting this done quickly and efficiently. So now if you've got a door lock system that has a cable and pushes pins into your track here, you can see where there's actually some cutouts here. I don't have that on my garage door, but if you've got those, you would want to go ahead and engage that to lock your door down. If you don't have that, you can use a pair of curved jaw vice grips and lock that above one of the wheels so that you can't actually bring the door up. And now as you get prepared to wind, I'm going to start on the right side here. And these bolts here that I loosened up before, I go ahead and just tighten them down just a little bit so that they come in contact with the torsion rod, then I'll back them off about a quarter turn, just so when I'm ready to tighten them up later, I will have an easier time getting those tightened with fewer twists and turns while the spring is in tension. So we're going to use our winding rods. We're going to make sure that we're not behind the winding cones here at all. We want to make sure we're away from it and we're reaching into it to put our rods. And so make sure we're back with our ladder and our body placement. And then now, remembering the number of turns that you took off earlier, we're going to go ahead and put that same amount of turns back on. Bear in mind that as we go, the amount of force it's going to take is going to increase. And these are measured in quarter turns. One, 2, 3, 25. Now what I need to do is to make sure that all of the cable drums are winding up correctly. And then we'll repeat the same process on the other side of the springs. I'll give you a different view this time, and we'll repeat our windings, and then we should be about done. And once you've got both sides of the winding cones tightened up to the number of turns that you need, come back over here and we can release the locking pliers from the side of our door. We'll set those aside. And now, assuming that the door stays down, that puts us in good shape. We should be able to manually lift the door at this point. Now with the door down, we're going to make sure the door stays down so the door is balanced. And then now we're going to plug back in our garage door opener. Oh, in my case, we're just going to go like this. Plug in the garage door opener. And then now, in my case here, this is going to run the opening piece all the way down the track until it catches with the opener. Click. And then now we're going to make sure that we can successfully open the garage door. Just like that, and we're back in business. So I hope you found this video useful. If you liked this video, make sure you click the like and the subscribe button below. I look forward to seeing you on my next video, and have a great day. Bye.